What's going on YouTube? It's Pelfrey, and we're going to talk about a couple things that have gone on with the tank here lately. I've kind of come to the conclusion that this is Diatoms, which I pretty much knew just because the new rock structures are in the tank. I mean, this has been going on for a little while. It's going away, but what kind of struck me as odd was I just happened to look in the tank one night and it was gone. I mean, the sand bed was pristine. So whenever the lights come on, shortly after the lights come on, and as they ramp up, the worse this gets. Now, it is better than it was, so there's really not much I can do about it at this point. I'm just gonna let it ride out. The rocks are turning green. Looks like this rock has a sinus infection, except for this spot right here, and the only reason that's white is because I had this piece sitting on top of this piece for a while. This piece has got some purple on it, so in a matter of time, this whole piece right here will look like it's been in the tank for quite a while. So I've never really had an issue with growing coralline on rocks. I guess it's a blessing. Now, I do still have the bubble algae going on in the tank and this red turf stuff going on in the tank. But these new hammers that I got from Pieces of the Ocean are looking fantastic, if I must say so myself. So this is a branching hammer. This is a wall hammer. And then I got two torches. And the torches aren't looking nearly as good as the hammers, but they're opening up, and it may just take them some time. I've had these for a little while, so nothing new to report there. You may see some bubbles in the tank and a scratch right here that has been on the tank for a while. I have started bubble scrubbing again, just to help clean up the tank. That definitely cannot hurt at all, I don't believe anyway. So I have the this air pump connected to the apex, and it's running on a timer a couple times a day. I am using the Lee's wooden air stone. I did super glue a frag plug to it to kind of help hold it down. And then there's a piece of rebel rock that I was using to hold it down. So where it's at right now is about, let's get that light turned back on. It's about 2 inches or so from the inlet of the Core 20, which works out perfect. So I get bubbles in the tank, but I don't feel like I'm getting an overabundance of bubbles in the tank. Yeah, I have a frag rack way up at the top of the tank, just because the only way that you can see it is literally if you get down here and look for the frag rack. So as you may remember, I did pull out the manifold, and I have some plastic hose clamps here that I need to get onto the hose here. I just have some metal clamps here. I'm not really too concerned about having the metal clamps there, just because they're not, if they get wet, then I got far worse problems than that. But the metal clamps are easy to take off versus these plastic clamps, unless somebody has a trick, because once they're clamped on, they are a pain in the butt to remove. So luckily I have a union here, which will make removing the pump super simple. So I do still want to run a carbon reactor, and I do have carbon in here with some tank water that I'm probably going to have to throw out. Murphy with Murphy's Aquatics was nice enough to send me a Sicce. This is, I think, the Micra pump, and unfortunately it just does not have the pressure or the head height to feed this reactor at the height that it's at. There's definitely not an issue with the pump. I can undo the hose here. The pump pumps water, and I can undo the Murloc line going into the reactor, and it pumps water. So it is definitely a head height issue, but stay tuned later in the video. I have a solution for that. I do plan to put the Neptune auto feeder in the return section somehow. Luckily, I'm going to run the reactor for the carbon on its own pump. So what I can do is I can program this pump to shut off for like an hour or so whenever the auto feeder runs, so that that way I'm not feeding pellets into the carbon reactor. So, you know, if you don't have an Apex, you can do all kinds of stuff with the Neptune Apex. It's definitely not a must-have, but it's very, very nice to have. I did follow up with Neptune systems on the little rust spot that I saw on the Core 20, and they basically thought that something may have got caught in between the two fittings there. So the fittings weren't metal anyway, so that rust spot was just kind of strange to me. What I think may have happened is I may have used a hose clamp at some point and cut it off, and maybe that fell into the sump, which may have been or may be some of the issues that I've had. You know, that's up for debate, no question about that. In a previous video, I mentioned either using the GEM5 lights from the Santa Monica Rain 2 algae turf scrubber, or the Kessel H80, which I have both. I have the Kessel lights, and obviously I have the GEM5 lights. What I did was I took a piece of acrylic. I need to peel the paper off of it. Bought this acrylic off eBay, and just because it's got some weight to it, I used some specific aquarium safe silicone tube the lights here. So they got the two plugs here, and I'll have to run this to the Apex. The idea is to set this inside of the sump, and this is what I'm going to use for microalgae. You can see that it is a little too long, so I'm going to have to trim it just a little bit, which won't be that big of a deal. But I chose this route because I can put it on the bottom of the sump, and I looked at the Kessel arm for the H80, and there's just not a lot of flex to it, and I can't mount it here because the doors won't shut, and I could possibly mount it over here, but I'm not so sure because there's, like I said, there's just not a lot of flex to it. As I mentioned earlier, Murphy with Murphy's Aquatics sent me this Sicce pump, and it just didn't have the head height on it that I'd hoped to power that reactor, and this is their micro pump. So I got the Sicce 0.5, which should have plenty of head height. I got some soft tubing here and a valve with a barb on it, so it'll go something like this into the tank and into the reactor. This is going to go into the return chamber, and again, if I decide to use the Neptune AFS, I can set this on a schedule to shut off for, you know, like an hour or so once the AFS runs, and I may have it shut off while I'm bubble scrubbing as well. Form factor, you can tell it's about double the size of this pump right here, but I should have no issues getting this into the Red Sea Reefer return section, and I did order way more tubing than I'm gonna need, but that's fine. I'd rather have more than not enough. I got some hose clamps here. I hate these hose clamps, I mentioned that earlier, but this is what's gonna work for my application. Change of plans. I did flip this bracket around. Obviously this is the input, that's the output. I'm actually gonna flip it around again so that the input is over on the left side, that I can pull, so that I can pull water from the skimmer section, return water into the return section, and then I won't even have to worry about shutting the pump off at all. So nylon screws come out, really simple to do. I'll show you here in a second, and we'll get the bracket flipped around. It takes 2 seconds to do. You can see the bracket here. It can go either way, so it's pretty universal. So I'm gonna put it actually this way, get it screwed in, and get it back into the tank. As I was creating the video, obviously I'm kind of planning this out in my head, and the original plan was to put the reactor pump over here, but I decided to swap the bracket out, so now I have the input over here next to the skimmer. And luckily the Sicce pumps are silent. I do have a plastic hose clamp on the bottom of the reactor and a metal hose clamp up here, because the plastic hose clamp that I have for 1/2 inch doesn't fit. Well, let me rephrase that. It does fit around the tubing, but it doesn't clamp the tubing. So what I'm gonna try is, I took some 1/2 inch tubing and I cut a little slit in it. So I'm gonna take the metal clamp off, wrap this around the exterior of it and see if I can get that clamp to hold there. Should have did this from the get-go, but I took the skimmer cup off of it, and you can see this was the clamp that was on there, and I took a piece of soft tubing, wrapped it around here, and I've got it clamped on, and it is secure, so that should work. I was wrong. We do have a leak, so until I can figure out a better solution or wait for somebody to tell me a better solution, the metal clamp goes back on because I can't deal with any leaks. Back with the metal clamp and no leaks, so unfortunately this is the way it's going to stay until I figure out a alternative solution. To sum up what I've got going on with the Refugium lighting, I'm not really sure what I'm going to do yet. I could very well put this on the bottom of the tank and have it facing up. Right now I just have it going across the top, and I really like it, and it really cuts down on the light bleed. Obviously there is going to be some light hitting the skimmer there, but for the most part the stand is pretty well out of the range of the light, so it shouldn't create any issues anywhere else. So I do have some flexibility with these lights, and it looks like these two will be just fine for this section here. So I do have some Kato Morpha on the way, and as soon as it gets here, we'll throw it in here and see what we can do with these GEM5 lights. Again, I do have the Kessel H80 that I can try out as well. My only obstacle again is mounting the light, and if push comes to shove, I could just use the Kessel mount for that. That's going to wrap up another video. I appreciate you stopping by, following along. Leave comments, suggestions, concerns down below. Be sure to check out the website at pelfrey.net. Check me out on Instagram at pelfreysreef, and I'll catch you on the next one.